So our Icy Damsel fly. We start with our hook in the vise. It's been debarbed. We're going to lay down a thread base. But one thing to point out on these curved hooks is you can't just go to where the hook starts to bend. You need to reference on this hook, it's going to be about where the barb is. So we start somewhere behind the eye. We're going to wrap our thread back to about halfway up the hook shank. So next, the tail for this fly. Now it's made out of marabou. It is a rather sparse fly, or rather sparse tail though. So you only need a quarter to half an inch worth of fibers off your marabou tail. I'll trim my butts. Tie them in and wrap back to the anchor point. Now once there, in order to prop the tail up, you take your thread, you go underneath, and then put in a wrap. And by putting that thread in behind, it really helps to prop the tail up. And we're going to take our thread and come back up to halfway. We then can go in and trim our tail to length. On this fly, the tail is just slightly shorter than a shank length. So next step is to add our copper wire. And we end with the thread back up just behind the eye. So we just make sure that our thread is nice and tight right behind the eye of the hook. We can then go and attach our scud back. So we start by taking the scud back, and with our scissors we cut it to a point, and that's to make it easier to attach it to the fly. We then will place it up against the eye of just behind the eye of the hook on the side, catch it with a wrap, make sure that it's secure, then we can fold it forward and wrap over top of the scud back again to catch it. And again, we're trying to keep the thread as tight to the eye as we can while we're doing this. Now we can just let that hang. Now we can go in and we can attach our bead chain eyes. And we're going to attach them right behind this. Now we start by taking the thread and put it in between the two beads. Can then get it up on the hook and just wrap between on either side. Now that it's on, we need to make sure that our bead chain eyes are relatively level and square. And then we'll take wraps alternating on either side. Now the last step in this to tighten everything up is we're going to take our thread and we're going to loop it underneath both sides. Tighten it up, ending up at the back. And just double check to make sure that your beads are nice and secure. We can then take our thread and wind all the way back to the anchor point. So now we're ready to make the body of the fly using what's called a dubbing noodle. Now the big thing with dubbing that I really want to stress to people is the worst mistake you can make is to take a huge amount of dubbing and try and stick it on the thread. Less is better in this case. So I've grabbed a really small pinch of dubbing and I'm going to put it up against the thread, and then with my thumb and forefinger, I'm going to take and twist it onto the thread. And again, the key here is to make a nice thin noodle. So I can hold it at the base and twist and kind of stretch at the same time. And I'm after a nice thin noodle. Once you get it onto the thread, you can take it and you can slide it up. And now you can apply it to the body. Now the body of this fly is just a nice, relatively slender cigar shape, and we're going to wrap it up to just behind the bead chain eyes. This dubbing noodles, because we're only applying a small amount at a time, we're probably going to have to do this multiple times to be able to get enough material on. And again, we want to stop just a little bit behind the eyes. We have some work to do behind there and need to leave ourselves some room. If you have any excess, you can simply just go in and use your fingers to remove it. And you'll be using this again later. So now that we have our dubbing body made, we can go in with our wire and we can wrap forward up to the eyes. You're looking for about 5 wraps. Catch it, tie it off, helicopter off. So the next part's to add legs. We're looking for 4 legs on either side. The legs are made out of crystal flash. So depending on the length of crystal flash, you can take it, double it, quadruple it, or just grab multiple pieces. Just depends the length of crystal flash that you have. You don't need a lot of length on them. So I've got my crystal flash. I'm going to lay it up against the side right behind the bead chain eyes. Attach the one side, flip around to the other, and get a wrap on that. Now that they're secured, it's just trimming it to length. The length of the legs on this is about the same as the length of the body. So now I have my legs in place, I can go in and I can finish applying the dubbing to the rest of the fly. And again, a little bit at a time. So I'm going to fill in the spot behind the eyes. We're going to go between the eyes. About a wrap in front. And we want to finish up in behind our bead chain eyes. We then can take our scud back, pull it between the two eyes, and just make a nice tight wrap in behind to secure it. We can then go in and whip finish. Cut off our tying thread, and then we're going to take our scud back and trim it to length. It's about half the length of the body. Now there's just one thing left to do, and it's optional, is to go back to our scud back and to cut a small V in the back of it. This is where really sharp scissors comes in handy. And there you have it, the Icy Damsel fly.